can see how the government is engaging think tanks to influence a policy on trade. And that is very, very important because as think tanks, we are able to provide solutions and to give the positions which government should be able to take in a particular policy issue.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Cape Town, South Africa. Our guest today is Dr. John Karanja, the Acting Director at the Kenya Institute for Public Policy, Research and Analysis, or KIPPRA for short. Dr. John, we welcome you today here at Trans Echoes first, and we're happy to have you here. Can I ask you first, what are the day-to-day work of KIPPRA Institute in Kenya?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to start by first thanking TREDS for inviting the Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis to this loud table. We are very grateful as an institute to participate and also to bring our contribution to what think tanks are doing in Africa and also Middle East. To start, let me say that KIPPRA is a government think tank, which has been there for the last 25 years now. And as a government think tank, we have got several mandates, and one of them is conducting objective policy research and analysis with the aim of generating evidence to support the government in policy making. Therefore, we consider ourselves as a government advisors as far as policy making process is concerned. Of course, we also get into issues to do with capacity building, that is human and also institutional capacity building for the government and other stakeholders. And lastly, we engage in collaboration and partnership. And that's why we're interested to be in this forum. Thank you very much.
It's an honor for us to have such a high-profile institute as well, and a round table where we share knowledge among think tanks and gain expertise. I think it's an important thing to have such high-profile guests such as your institute as well, Dr. John.
Well, thank you very much.
So to begin, Dr. John, the first question is, would you explain how think tanks differ from other organizations involved in policy research and advocacy, especially in the context of Global South?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's a very good question because as think tanks, we have a specific role for us to play. Let me start by saying that as think tanks, one thing that we do that makes us different from other research institutions is what we call generating evidence. As think tanks, we are there to generate evidence for the policymakers. And this evidence should be able to inform policy-making decisions. That makes think tanks to stand out among other research organizations, whereby our research is not just research, but is research packaged in a way that a policymaker can look at that research and see at least there's a message for him as far as policy-making process is concerned. The other thing that makes us very different from other research organizations is because we go beyond policy research and analysis, and we do what we call policy analysis. And policy analysis is whereby, as think tanks, we look into a certain policy that is in place, we deep dive to that policy, and again, we're able to identify policy gaps. And by identifying policy gaps, we're able now to recommend how those gaps in the existing policies can be crossed by the governments and the policymakers. Or we can also recommend that there are some policy gaps here, but we don't need to review a policy. We need to come up with a new policy altogether. So that can only happen in a think tank by conducting the policy analysis, which is different from policy research.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
And so the main role is to generate evidence in order for the policymaker to make the best thoughtful decision.
You're right, and I agree with you because as think tanks, we are there to produce evidence and to advise on the same.
The second question, Dr. John, what specific roles do think tanks play in shaping public policy? And can you provide examples of successful interventions and contribution of think tanks in Kenya?
Yeah, again, that's a very good question because as think tanks, we need to influence policy. We undertake objective. The research we do as think tanks is objective research.
We don't take sides.
We don't take sides. And it should be objective. Therefore saying that if we are going to give policy recommendations, These are objective policy recommendations that evidence has been generated, and we can put them on the table for the policymakers. By having objective research and evidence, it means again that we are able now to take this discussion further, because what policymakers are looking for is the evidence. Evidence that is able to make the policy-making process, number one, very easy. It's going to make policies that are formulated practical, relevant, and also easy to implement. For example, in Kenya, the country is negotiating with the United States of America on how to come up with a bilateral trade agreement. And I remember when this discussion started between Kenya and the US, the government requested KIPPRA to undertake a deep analysis on the impact of Kenya-US free trade area and give a recommendation on the position which the country should take in these discussions. Now, you can see how the government is engaging think tanks to influence a policy on trade. And that is very, very important, because as think tanks, we are able to provide solutions and to give the positions which government should be able to take in a particular policy issue, like that one of trade and free trade agreements between a country, that's Kenya, and the US. So we play a very key role, and that is very practical, because after that, I was able to note that the discussions started moving very well. First round, second round of negotiations, and the like. So think tanks really influence policy, and that is very key for us to continue influencing policy by giving practical, timely, and relevant policy recommendations.
So do you see the main parts? You said, as you answered the question, you said the three main parts of a policy recommendation is to be practical, relevant, and easy to implement as well.
Yes. Actually, that's what the policymaker needs. And that is why, as we continue this discussion, we'll be able even to see how we can be able even to make our policy recommendations easy for the policymakers. I know we are struggling at that, and I'm mentioning about it, how we have technical reports that sometimes are not palatable to the policymakers. Therefore, it is important to give relevant, practical, easy to implement policy recommendations as think tanks.
Even the case you mentioned when it comes to whether Kenya and US should enter a free zone or free trade agreements, that's a high important or a case of importance to be relied on a think tank by the government as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, because you'll find think tanks, we are able to provide what we call technical advisory as think tanks.
Technical advisory.
Advisory. We can be able to get into the technical aspect, which the policymaker may not get into. And then, because it's an objective research and objective analysis, we're able to provide options. And this is where, again, we need to look at, as we provide influence on policy as think tanks, how we provide policy options to the policymakers so that they have a latitude of seeing we have this option, this is what it takes, we have this option, and then they can take the options that we provide as think tanks. We need to go beyond policy recommendations and also come with the policy options for the policymakers, which again are practical, relevant, and easy to implement.
Dr. John, when it comes to the challenges faced, what are some of the unique challenges think tanks encounter in their efforts to influence policy, especially in developing countries? Like, what are the challenges that faces think tanks when it comes in areas of developing countries?
Yeah, it is very true. Think tanks in developing countries, they encounter a lot of challenges. And one of them is the inadequacy of data. Remember, the evidence we generate for the policymakers, we require data. Data that is, number one, adequate to address all the public policy issues. Data that is, again, relevant. Remember the relevance I talked about of a policy should be informed by relevant data.
Yes.
And again, data that is actually timely. We don't need to use data for 30 years to address today's issues. So in Africa, you find that the element of data is an issue. And now as think tanks, we rely heavily on data to do our policy research and analysis. So that's one issue that we are struggling with, getting relevant data, having the capacity also to correct the data. And that's why you find despite having the national statistics data office in all countries that is the official data statistics for the country, you find again correcting data is very expensive. So we rely probably on data from World Bank, from IMF, and the like.
When you say very expensive, I think one of the challenges as well is the funding.
Yes, I agree with you. Funding is also another issue that think tanks are facing.
Yes.
Even where we have government-sponsored think tanks,
Definitely.
like KIPPRA, which is a government think tank, the funding is not enough. Resources are not enough. And this is where now we want to look into how we can have strategic partnership for funding, where we need now to write proposals for funding. Again, where we need to engage in what we call demand-driven research for clients, which we can charge and get some more finances to support our activities. The other challenge we have is what we call institutional capacity.
Exactly.
You see, for us to be able to generate evidence that is relevant, we have to look into our capacity of staff and institution. The retooling of researchers to keep updating their skills on different models, on different tools for policy analysis, and how to acquire these tools for policy analysis and institutionalize them in our institution is also a challenge because of the cost that comes with retooling the researchers, give them continuous professional development and skills, and also coming up with these tools that can support us. There are so many tools that we are having nowadays that can help us in policy analysis. Talk about CG, talk about foresight futures, and other models we need to bring into our institutions to help us deep dive and do proper forecasting. So having this is becoming a challenge, and that amounts to the institutional capacity to handle the policy, research, and analysis, and again, it impacts on how, again, we generate the evidence, which policymakers are waiting.
Yes. Would you agree, Dr. John, one more challenge in some underdeveloped African countries would be also the political climate itself? Like, it's not supportive of research.
I agree with you, and I think that's a challenge we have, and we need to come up with overcoming that. For example, you find that where we have policies in place to support research, and a certain percentage of budget actually is supposed to be set aside for research, you find sometimes it becomes a challenge even to meet that percentage of budget that should go to research. But now again, how do you overcome that political dynamics? I think one thing we need to do as think tanks is to continuously engage with the policymakers and governments. And one of the platforms we have is like what you're having here in Cape Town, where what the threats are done to organize such a forum. We need to be taking advantage of our forums and invite policymakers in our forums for them to understand that we have solutions they are looking for. So that as they continue with the administration and running the governments, they're able to integrate think tanks into the process. The other thing we need to do to be able to get the attention of the governments and also to navigate these political issues is to ensure that our research actually are informing the government's agenda. Very, very important. To ensure that the research that we are undertaking is actually informing and speaking to the government agenda of the day.
It's related to government plans. It's related to the government intentions or agenda or strategic goals as well.
Sure, and it's actually supporting the vision that the government has put in place. I think that will make us more relevant, and we shall be able to navigate the political issues that we find as we continue doing our research and analysis.
That was a marvelous, fulfilling answer, Dr. John. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving to the next question, Doctor. Collaboration, when it comes to the subject of collaboration and partnership, how do think tanks collaborate with government, civil society, and international organizations in the policy-making process? What benefits do those partnerships bring?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And this is an area that we need to continue strengthening the collaboration and partnership with the government and other stakeholders. I'm aware that, like in Kenya, the collaboration we have with the government is that you will find in most government technical working committees, they invite think tanks to provide technical experts. So that kind of a collaboration where you find think tanks represented in task forces, they are represented in working committees for the government is very, very key. And that's a channel that we need to strengthen with the government and collaborate. Because when we have such avenues, it will help us even to carry our findings from our institutes, from our think tanks, and offload these findings into policy making. So there is need for us to collaborate and strengthen that where we have opportunities to invite the government. Again, for the members of public, very, very important. I know that members of public, they also play a very key role in policy-making process. And our collaboration with them will be very key because we are able to bring to the members of public their role in policy-making process. Remember, public participation is very key in policy-making.
Yes.
And public has to participate. As think tanks, it's obligation to engage public and let them know at what point in policy-making they come in for public participation.
Yeah, they don't come in at any point.
Yes.
There is a certain point for public participation as well.
Yes.
And it's the role of think tanks to make research, to involve them or to tell them, to enrich them or to make them aware of what is their public participation should be as well.
I agree with you because you see, as government is making policies, I think tank we are there to provide evidence and technical expert to the government. Some of the issues that government is struggling with, the public has got solution. We want the public to feed into the policy making and give us also solution to what the government should do. And when we do this, we are going to make sure that the policies that are being developed by the government, number one, they have got a buy-in by the public because they were part and parcel of the process of making these policies. And they contributed in the process of the policy making. So bringing them in is very, very key. They have solutions. We want to make sure that, again, the policies are very relevant by understanding the issues that are affecting the public. So it's very key to have that collaboration and partnership. Then the other thing on think tanks with public. I understand public sometimes are not aware on our role. And I think when we partner with the public, especially when we are doing our research, by having round tables and telling them this is what you want to undertake, and they give us views so that, again, our research is also informed by the feedback and views from the public, so that, again, we undertake objective policy research and analysis that has got feedback from the public and other stakeholders. Thank you.
No, that was a more than a fulfilling answer, Dr. John.
Thank you.
As well, on the same topic of the public and public engagement, what do you think tanks, in what ways do you think think tanks should engage the public to raise awareness about policy issues? And how important is this engagement for governments in countries with high poverty rates and challenges to access education? Because, as you said, it is very important for think tanks, sometimes involving the public is also making them aware of the issues as well. And it's also collecting feedback. So how important do you think this process is?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think my response to that is that the space where we involve public is very, very key. And I'm looking forward to a think tank like Trends Research and KIPPRA, where we undertake policy research and analysis at our institutions. But again, it becomes very critical for us to ensure that even the recommendations we are giving in our outputs are known by the public. That's why it is important to validate our research work with the stakeholders who are the public. That is important to disseminate our research outputs with the stakeholders and public to tell us whether we are on track from what we are getting from the data, whether what the data is giving us after our analysis is actually speaking to the real issues that we want to address. So the benefit with this is that we are going also to change how we do our research. We are going also to change even how we package our research outputs so that, again, they become friendly to the public and also to the consumers of our outputs.
When it comes to the metrics and how do you measure impact, like what metrics can be used to access the impact of think tanks on public policy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I like it because we need to ask ourselves, like you're saying, how do we measure the impact we are making as think tanks? And I think one way to look into it is to actually undertake an analysis, an evaluation of how well the government has been able to uptake the evidence that we provide. Because in most cases, we provide evidence, but how do this evidence get itself into the policy? So that is very key for us to understand as think tanks. How is the uptake of our evidence by the government? The other thing that we can use to measure our impact and the metrics that we can look at as think tanks is our participation in government activities. Very, very key. Because if we continuously engage in government activities, in policy making, we are always there, we are always providing direction, we are always carrying our evidence and putting on the table to policymakers, it means we're having an impact. So the level of involvement of think tanks by the government in policy making process is another element we can look at it. If we don't have government asking for our expertise, then there's a problem. If we may not be able to tell how much they are uptaking the evidence that we are providing. Then also the level of government involvement in our activities. And that is why we need to be launching some of our outputs. And we invite government officials, we invite policymakers to attend our launch. We do this validation and ensure that government attends our validation. So that interaction between the government and the think tanks can help us understand where we are as government commitment in supporting think tank is concerned.
And looking ahead, Dr. John, what trends do you foresee in the role of think tanks, especially considering technological advancement and shifting political landscape in the Middle East and Africa? So in the Middle East and Africa, as putting both regions concentration, how do you foresee the future of think tanks?
Yeah, the future of think tanks actually is great. I can say that. And what we need to do is also to change dynamics with time. We are talking of technology, the fourth industrial revolution coming in, AI, and other things. So we need to, going to future, look into how we can be able to work on our outputs. Some of our outputs are highly technical, okay? And we need to see how we can be able to make sure that even if we do at the back end highly technical outputs, but what we present to the policymakers and stakeholders is actually friendly. So how we package our outputs going to the future will be different. We need to look at how we can have, of course, the policy papers, which are very technical, but again, how we can even package some policy briefs for the policymakers with key messages, how we can package probably infographics going forward so that a policymaker just look at the infographics and get the message of what you want to recommend. How we can also package our outputs into the popular versions. So how we package our output going forward is going to be different. So we're going to move from where we have highly technical reports and break it down now into policy briefs, popular versions, infographics. That's one. The other thing is that because of technology, we have to get ourselves into validation workshops and forums using technology. We have to get in the X space and have validations. We have to use our social medias to disseminate information. We don't need to wait until we have a forum and discuss our outputs. So we have to change because of technology to make sure that our outputs are reaching far and wide by leveraging on technology. And lastly, we have to see to it that the relationship we have with government and other policymakers is actually strengthened. Because as we continue generating evidence, we want to see the impact of this evidence in policy. We want to see government and stakeholders appreciating our role as think tanks. And we are going to address issues of financing, we are going to address issues of capacity building for our researchers, and even the institutional capacity building by having infrastructures, tools for research, and the rest. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. John. In the end, I just would like to thank you for making our knowledge deeper and with your answers and with your knowledge. And you've been a marvelous guest of Trans Echoes. And thank you very much for being here and sharing your thoughtful insights on such important matters that affects think tanks today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.